Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode number 121 of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. I'm your coach, Angela Pugh, here to help you take the baby steps to get the grown-up, sober life you want, just one little step at a time, my friends. I know you're excited about this episode, and I am right there with you. We have Tricia Lewis from Recovery Happy Hour podcast on the show today, and I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Tricia's podcast and my podcast came out around the same time, like within a few months of each other. And I didn't even know that until she and I did some recording together. Like, I always saw her on social media and I just assumed that she and her pod had been around way longer than mine. And she's also the name that comes up over and over again when I see and hear you guys talking about your other favorite recovery podcast. She is hands down the most popular. So several months ago, I reached out to her and I said, I would love to meet you. Your name comes up all the time in my community, and let's collab and do some cool stuff together. And that's what we're doing. I went on her show. Now she's on my show. She did a video piece with me for everyone in my Sober Society membership site. And I'm going to reach out to her and do some other cool stuff together too, some lives and things like that. Before we jump into that, I want to give a shout out to someone who left me a review on my professional Facebook page. It's Angela Pugh Professional Coach. That's my professional page. And it's not very often that anyone leaves a review there. I think because I have so many social media pages and like 4 Facebooks, right? Like, it's a lot. So it all blends together after a while. But I love this review, and I wanted to say thank you, Angie. I will say her first name because she posted it on a public Facebook page, so she's obviously not hiding, but I don't want to totally call her out either, okay? But here's what she wrote. She said, I found her podcast about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I absolutely connected with everything she says. She's a positive woman and so real. She gives me a lot of inspiration. I feel like everything she says resonates with me and what I've gone through and what I need to think about. She's holding me accountable by facing my own truths and helping me continue to work through my mental and emotional struggles. Yes, yes, yes. And I want to say to Angie too, not only thank you, and thank you for letting me be a part of your journey in this, but also that I'm so impressed that you are showing up for yourself and that you're ready to take that super honest look at yourself and learn to be better. That's hard. This stuff is hard, and it takes a lot of perseverance and courage and strength, and I am right with you in it every day. And I'm always so blown away when I see all of you showing up for yourselves every day and showing up for each other every day. Like, it's amazing. We only get through this together. So let's keep showing up and lifting each other up and learning from each other, and we will all conquer this damn thing, okay? And another super exciting announcement, if you've been curious about my program and how it works and what it's like working with me, I have a live webinar coming up. As usual, it's totally free, and it will be live with me. Woohoo! I know a lot of you think about working with me, and maybe you've been on the fence or you've been too shy or scared to make a move. And at the same time, you really want to know how to build your sobriety in that 10 to 15 minutes a day, or how to overcome those cravings so you're not fighting them all day, every day, and really how to stop the yo-yo sobriety. And that is the name of the webinar, Stop the Yo-Yo Sobriety. And I want to be clear about something from the start too. This is not a sales webinar. This is not a thing where you sit through the thing and I give you some special rate if you sign up right now today. This is not that, okay? I will definitely give you the opportunity to connect with me if you are interested, but this is not a sales thing. It's an information thing. Am I going to tell you how great it is? Of course I am, because it is great. And I put a lot of work into making it great. And I'm super proud of the results we get when we work together. But it is not a buy now webinar. It's an information webinar, pulling back the curtain. So don't feel like I'm expecting you to show up credit card in hand, because it won't do you any good. This is a see the plan, learn the process, get answers, all free. And for those of you who want more and want to move forward, of course, you will have that opportunity. But I have to be honest with you guys, working with me and doing that intensive work, not everybody is the right fit. You know what I'm saying? And I will never talk you into working with me. And I feel like sometimes that's what sales can feel like I'm talking you into work. I will never talk you into working with me, because if I have to talk you into it, you are not ready, especially to be a part of a really awesome program where we dig deep and we do a lot of work and we spend a lot of time together, right? The program is about really getting it together, and just like the name of it, stop the yo-yo sobriety. So I'm not interested in talking you into working with me. So don't ever worry about that with me. I'm not super salesy. I feel like when you are ready, I just want to give you the information to make it as easy as possible. But I will never talk you into it, and I will never sell you on the idea of working with me, because it doesn't do you any good or me any good. You're going to end up disappointed, and so am I. So I will not do that, okay? So it's not a buy now webinar. It is an information webinar. And you can sign up for more information on the webinar at www.myrecoverytoolbox.com/120, because it was episode 120 that I decided to have a webinar and first announced it. So www.myrecoverytoolbox.com/120, and I will keep you updated on the date and time of the live webinar. Again, www.myrecoverytoolbox.com/120. Are you ready to jump into this conversation with Tricia Lewis from Recovery Happy Hour podcast? Let's do it. So I think maybe you guys may have heard of today's guest. I mean, you might know her from this podcast. It might be a little popular. I am so stoked to welcome Tricia Lewis onto Addiction Unlimited today. I'm so excited to have you here.
This is so fun. Thank you so much for having me. It's so crazy to be on this side of the mic.
Yeah, right? I know. And I've been in the middle of a launch and doing all of these solo episodes and recording so much by myself. It feels a little weird to be interviewing again, honestly.
Yeah, it's great. I never share my story on the show. I just like to help people share their stories. So it's rare that I get to talk about myself.
Yeah, I get that. So let's start with that. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So my name is Tricia Lewis, and I host a podcast called Recovery Happy Hour, and it's about to celebrate its second birthday. So it's going strong, and it's one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. And I hosted a little event last year called Sober by Southwest with my partner in that endeavor, Chris Marshall. And I got sober in 2016. So recovery has been a big, big part of my world for almost 4 years now.
Nice. I love that you love your podcast too, because it is truly one of the pieces of my career that I'm the most proud of. It's one of the things I'm absolutely the most proud of. Mm-hmm. And I just turned 2 in April.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, we started right around the same time.
Yeah, which I didn't realize until I talked to you when I was on your show. I didn't realize that. I think because I saw you so much on social media, I just made the assumption that you had been around way longer.
Well, happy birthday, by the way, if you just celebrated too. Happy second birthday to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I just had my regular birthday too. I just turned 48.
Well, happy birthday twice. Racking them up today.
That's an interesting journey. Okay, so tell me, what made you want to start a podcast? Like, what was that thought process for you in your sobriety that urged you to do that?
Well, I started it when I had been sober for 2 years, something like that. And I was in a Facebook accountability group and with, 300 people. And there's a lot of newcomers in there. And at that point, having 2 years felt like a lot to some people. And so I was just giving the basic advice that anybody would give to their, fellow person who's struggling. And people kept saying, well, when are you going to write the book? When are you going to write a book? I guess they liked what I had to say. And to be honest, I don't have the discipline to be a writer. I'm so envious of people that do. And I was like, well, what's the best way for me to sort of, give back and be of service that doesn't involve writing? So it was a podcast. That was what I wanted to do. And the thing about podcasts is that so many of them are stories of what it's like when somebody's drinking, which serves a purpose. But I wanted to talk about, it's kind of like you, I wanted to talk about what happens after, what happens once you get sober and you're living your life without alcohol. What's next? And so those are the stories that I focus on. And, everyone that comes on the show has to have at least a year of sobriety so that we've got enough to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that too, because it is like, I feel like the drunk part of the story is the least interesting part. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because so many of us do the same things. Our parts of our stories are similar. Some people drank worse than others, of course. I definitely had more legal trouble than a lot of people.
Well, but I think you and I can both agree that those stories are important, but then after a while you do get kind of tired of them and you want to hear something new, which is, again, is another reason why I don't really share my story on the podcast. It's not because I'm hiding anything. It's just because it's just not that interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. The recovery part to me is way more interesting. Because it's been more fun, really. And this is something we've been talking about a lot in my Facebook group and in my membership site of like having fun in sobriety and what does that look like and how do you have fun in sobriety and all that kind of stuff. And it's so crazy to me to look back on my drinking life and how much time I spent in bars. You know what I mean? And all I ever did was talk about all these things I wanted to do.
Right.
And it's so baffling to me now. I'm like, why do people ask what you do to have, like, I do whatever I want now.
Right.
I have no limitations. I do every single thing I ever wanted to do. I go do now.
But that fear of missing out is what keeps us drinking for so long. And that was one of the big things that I wanted to address on Recovery Happy Hour was that fear of missing out. And really, like, my target audience is that person who still hasn't taken the leap yet, because I know what that feels like and I know what they're afraid of. And I'm like, I just want to share these stories that say, come on, it's really fun. Like, just try it. It's really fun. Yeah, just try it. And, I was on the couch drinking alone for the last year of my drinking. Like, that is not fun. Like, a fear of missing out on what? Like leaving the house?
Yes. No, I totally agree, because I didn't do I spent my whole life in bars because I was a bartender too, right? So if I wasn't working, I was there drinking. Right. I literally spent 20 years of my life sitting in a bar, like doing nothing. Yeah,
that story gets old real fast.
It gets old real fast. But I thought I was fabulous, by the way. And I thought my life was fabulous.
We all did.
Yeah, right. I thought I really had it going on, but no, I was very wrong. I just had a limited worldview at that time.
Yep. I know the feeling.
So how old were you when you first realized that you had a real problem?
I think I figured out I wasn't a normal drinker when I was probably about 22, 23. And that's when I started to notice how scary my blackouts were. And it wasn't just like, oh, I don't remember last night. It was like, oh, like I did some really destructive stuff last night and I don't remember it. And you're just kind of trying to pull the pieces together. And I noticed that when my friends were talking about their nights of heavy drinking, they were always laughing about it. And it was fun and lighthearted. And I was scared of mine. And that didn't feel right. So I was always worried about my drinking at that point. Like, I don't think I ever really had 100% fun with it after those blackouts got pretty scary. And I continued to drink until I was 35. I got sober when I was 35. That whole time, I mean, I come from a family of addiction. I have alcoholics in my family. I was around a sibling that had a terrible drug and alcohol problem. So I knew what alcohol could do. And having that knowledge of the danger of it, and knowing that you don't drink normally and you're really like messing things up sometimes, after a while, nothing about that is fun. It's just, okay, now this is just what I do. This is just what I do now. I just drink. I get home and I'm stressed, so now I drink. Okay, it just became just part of me. It wasn't so much like what I was enjoying anymore. It was just like this thing I was dragging around all the time.
Yeah, it really does become survival. It was, I mean, I was the same way at the end of mine, where it was not fun. There was really nothing fun about it. I think I kind of felt humiliated all the time because I felt so out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And it it's like I just had to do it to be okay. It
Yeah.
wasn't fun. It wasn't like, oh yeah, let's go out and party. It was, I have to do this or I'm not going to survive.
Well, but there's such a complex layer to that too with mine, because I was super high functioning, so ambitious. I worked in the restaurant industry. I worked in kitchens forever. And I moved all over the country. I got my first executive chef job when I was like 22 or 23. And so I could drink all night and then get up and go work 15 hours the next day because A, that's just what you do in the restaurant industry.
Mhm.
And B, because I wanted to make sure that nobody knew I had a problem. I was so protective of my drinking problem. And because I knew how much I worried about the people in my family that were destroying their lives. And I didn't want anyone to worry about me. And I was super codependent, big time perfectionist. So I just wanted to make sure that it always looked like everything was fine. So that became just as important as the drinking. And then eventually as important as the hangovers was like covering up that double life, which is just as exhausting as the hangovers. And
Exhausting.
so
Yeah.
exhausting. And that's the thing. I just kept looking around at my friends that drink, even the ones that were out partying on the weekends, they didn't seem to be having the same concern over their drinking that I was. It just something just felt off. And that's the thing. It's like you can't ever compare your drinking to anybody because you can't quantify a problem by how much you're drinking. It's all about what's in your head and how much you're
Yeah.
thinking about it and obsessing about it and worrying about it and trying to fix your mistakes. Like that is where the problem lives.
Yeah, I say the same thing. It's not about how much you drink or how often you drink. It's
Mm-hmm.
about your relationship with alcohol. How much mind space is it taking up? Like,
Exactly.
because it took up all my mind space. I was either drinking or I was hungover or I was planning drinking and planning where we're going and inviting the people. And like it consumed all of my time, really.
Absolutely. The obsession. The obsession. I would just be driving somewhere. I'd be on a road trip for 4 hours and I would just be thinking about drinking while I was like, I mean, I wasn't drinking while driving, but
Mhm.
I'm thinking about drinking like while ignoring like the beautiful scenery around me and my favorite music on the radio. And that's weird. And it's just that's not normal. It's not normal.
Yeah. I tell this story. There was one particular night and I was probably, I don't know, I was probably 26 or 27 or something. And I lived in LA and we left this bar, me and my friends all left the bar, right? It was last call. And as we were walking out to the parking lot, all my buddies were like, okay, see you later. Call me tomorrow. And I remember just thinking, I was like, why are they going home when we could drink more?
Right.
Like I was baffled by their normal behavior. You know what I mean?
Right. Well,
Because
and
my
after
attachment to alcohol was so different. I could like, why would you stop drinking if you didn't have to, you
right.
know?
Well, but then after a while though, that kind of becomes your preference because when everyone else leaves, you can go home and drink the way you want to.
Yeah,
And
then I don't have to like edit myself in what I
right.
look, or like I would sneak off and be like, oh, I have to go to the ladies' room and stop and get a double shot on the way, you know?
Right. Oh, that yes, yes,
And then
yes,
probably another
yes.
one on the way back, like whatever.
Speaking my language. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like the last year, the drinking got really dark in the last 2 years. I'd gone through a terrible divorce that was a total surprise to me. And my whole life got turned upside down. So to deal with that, I drank because I didn't want to feel those feelings. And, I was my blackouts were getting worse. My drinking was so unpredictable at that point. I never knew what was going to happen once I picked up the first drink. Like, oh, is this just going to be a boring night where I just drink a bottle of wine alone and go to bed? Or am I going to drink a bottle of wine and then have 3 martinis and then leave the house and not remember where I went and wake up covered in bruises? I just never knew. And it became so dark and scary that I stopped going out to drink because I was dangerous. I was always injuring myself. Like I said, the blackouts, I mean, who knows what had happened the night before. And it was just easier to drink at home where I was safe alone. And then if I was alone, I didn't ever have to worry about anybody thinking I had a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating because I remember when I got sober, like a couple of people were surprised, like, oh, I didn't know you drank like that,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is just a testament to exactly what you were saying about really creating that picture. Because for me, I think it was more about control. I was a very controlled drunk. I
Mm-hmm.
was not a sloppy drunk. I didn't black out. I mean, I could honestly probably count on one hand how many times I blacked out my whole drinking life. It
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't a part of my story. But I drank every day of my life, so I think my
Mm-hmm.
tolerance just built up so slowly over time. But it's just insane to me to think that there were people that really didn't know how
Mm-hmm.
much I was drinking. And I
Mm-hmm.
think because they would come in my bar and drink with me for a couple of hours and then they would go home. And so in their head, like they thought I only drank for a couple of hours. Like they didn't realize that I was doing that couple of hours with different
With every
people. Yeah,
customer.
with
Yeah.
every single person. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then even after the bar closed, I would still, at the end of my drinking, the bar would close at 2, where I worked when I quit drinking. The bar would close at 2. And I was just staying up later and later drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Right.
would stay up till 4, and then it was 6, and then I was staying up till 7 or 8 a.m. just drinking,
Mm-hmm.
which is how I got in so much legal trouble, because then I had to go see my probation officer and I
Mm-hmm.
was drunk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
just such a crazy journey. I really appreciate that you said that you can't really compare your drinking with other people,
Yeah.
because firstly, I think that's kind of a dangerous game that we play, because it's a way that we try to make ourselves think we're not alcoholic, right? Or we don't have a drinking problem. I can sit back and go, oh, well, that never happened to me, or I didn't drink like that, or oh, wow, I'm not that bad.
Yeah.
You
The stories I told myself for 20 years. Yeah.
right, right.
Uh-huh.
See, I was never a denial person. Like I knew I had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't understand how bad it could get. I did not understand that at all until I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand that it would really kill me until I was there.
Right.
So I could still kind of separate myself a little bit, but I knew I didn't do it right. I think I thought I would die before I got sober. I just never expected to live long enough, which is sad in
It is
itself. But
sad. Well, I think I always knew I was going to have to quit someday. Always. I knew that just given my family history and knowing what I knew about alcohol, I understand how the drug works. And so I knew eventually I was going to have to get sober. It was just always on the horizon, but I wasn't going to do it until I was ready. Like I've always known if I was going to quit drinking, I was just going to do it one time. I tried all the moderation games, like all the rules you create for yourself, which I got really creative with those. But finally, when I quit, and it was November 14th of 2016, and I had been out all weekend partying very socially, it looked great on Instagram, and, going to party buses and brunches and the whole thing. I was social with people, and, but then going home and drinking alone. And, when I woke up on Monday, I couldn't shake that hangover. And I was really good at just plowing through any hangover. I could always just, as horrible as I felt, I could always fake it. And I couldn't shake that one. And by about 9:30, it wasn't getting any better, 9:30 at night. And I was like, okay, all right, this doesn't feel good. And then the next 2 days, it was full physical withdrawal. It was like the flu. And my organs hurt, my kidneys hurt. And I was like, okay, like we're here now, Tricia, this is happening. Like, here we are. And I didn't even really plan to quit. It snuck up on me. And I realized how dependent I had become on it. And that became painfully clear by how my body was responding when I stopped putting alcohol in my body. So after 3 days, I finally started to feel better. And then I was like, okay, all right, is this it? Are we really doing this now? And I was like, well, I got 3 days under my belt, and that's the most I had. And I don't think I had more than a couple of days sober in at least 3 years at that point. So I started listening to podcasts and was like, well, let me just kind of just gather some data. Let me see how I feel. And part of me thought that maybe I was just going to dry out for another couple of weeks and then start up again. But I'm smart enough to know that alcohol will kill me, especially a woman of my size. And the more I started to listen to people's stories, something finally clicked. I remember listening to a podcast and I heard someone's story, and it was my own. I did not know that there were other high functioning drinkers out there, because the only alcoholism I had ever been around was like that stereotypical stigma of somebody whose whole life is a dumpster fire. And I didn't know there were other people like me. Once I heard somebody else say my story, I was like, okay. And it's like the second you're not alone, everything shifts. Everything shifts. And that happened, I guess, about 3 or 4 days in. I was like, okay, maybe we're going to go in this direction now. And I just never looked back.
Yeah, my best friend, Andy, he says that I said one time when we were much younger, like probably late 20s, early 30s, he said I told him one time that I would live half my life drunk and half my life sober. And he's like, Angela, you told me that when we were like in our 20s. And I was like, really? Okay. Because I didn't really think that I would ever live past 40. I really didn't. Like, I didn't think about my life or have plans or whatever, because I never expected to live. I always thought that I would just go to sleep and never wake up. Probably for the same thing you just alluded to. You said because of your size. Are you a little person?
I'm 5'3".
Yeah. Well, so you're bigger than me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'm 5'2". Like, I'm miniature. And that was part of my thought process too. I was like, there is no way that my little tiny person can handle the amount of alcohol that I drink. Like, at some point my body is just going to give up. Like, it's just going to be over and I'm never going to wake up.
Yeah. My tolerance was frightening. It was frightening.
Yes.
And I don't know how I never landed in the hospital with alcohol poisoning, because I'm certain that some of my hangovers were just alcohol poisoning. Something was getting really, really bad. And you can't negotiate this with your body. You can negotiate it with your mind all day long, but eventually your body's going to win and tell you what's going on. Enough, there were enough times when I woke up, like I said, the bruises all over my legs, or I would wake up with like a fractured bone in my foot or a loose tooth, and having no clue where these things came from. And I'm like, this is not how I'm not supposed to wake up every morning startled and afraid and feeling horrible because I don't know what the last 12 hours of my life were like. Like, that's not how you're supposed to wake up every day and live your life and start your day. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, if you're there, that gives you a starting point of somewhere to go from there, but yeah, it became way too real and way too dangerous. And it's interesting because I didn't even really have a plan of like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. I just heard this story on this podcast, and she tried a meeting. She went to an AA meeting, and I was like, okay, I'll try that. I'm just going to learn and see what happens. And I'm like, and then I heard about this Facebook accountability group. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Maybe I'll try that. And I just tried anything that somebody told me worked for them. And it wasn't like I was going to figure it all and then do it. And that's something that I push so hard with people, because it doesn't matter how many Quit Lit books you read, or how many podcasts you listen to, or how many vision boards you create. You can't get sober until you get sober. Like, it doesn't really start until you stop drinking. And we all want to do it perfectly, and you can't. You have to get real messy and just admit that this is going to be hard and you're going to make a ton of mistakes, and that's okay. But just do it. It's like, close your eyes and jump in. And the more you seek out tools of just like, okay, I'm just going to learn. I'm just going to see what I can learn from here, rather than adopt all these things as like your forever identity. I know you and I talked about, when you get sober, it's not like you have to do those things forever. You don't have to go to a meeting every day for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah.
You can, it's like, it's so intense at first, but it's not always like that. That is no way indicative of what the rest of your life is going to be like. That's just when you're in triage.
Right. I feel like people look at it like it's a death sentence or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, who cares? Like, you
Yeah.
go sit down and say hi to people and make some jokes. Like, just enjoy yourself. There's nothing weird about it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just a group of people who are really committed to not acting crazy anymore. Like, that's it. We just want to be better humans. It's just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of the same way. I didn't really know anything about 12-step programs. Like, I know I read through the steps probably online drunk a couple of times, but I didn't even have any of the hangups, right? Like, I didn't have any of that. Is it a cult? Or I had a little bit of hang up about the God thing, because it mentions it a lot, but I just knew that that's where people went when they didn't want to drink anymore. That literally was the extent of my knowledge. So I was like, okay, cool. I don't want to drink anymore. So obviously I'll fit. And I just went, and it was fantastic. I'm really grateful I didn't have any of those barriers to overcome in my own head. I'm really grateful that I was just open, and I just went and sat down and shut up. And I had to get through the God thing a little bit, but it was a brief conversation with myself where it was just like, Angela, get over yourself, dude. Like, you're 33 years old. You're grown. Nobody can force you to go to church. Nobody can force you to believe in God. Like, just get over yourself. Go sit down and shut up. And that was the extent of it.
Yeah. And I think so. There's so many people that have, hangups about that and don't want to go because of what they've been told or what they think. And the truth is, we don't know anything about getting sober until we get sober. Like, we just don't know. There's so like, I'm like, just go find out. And if it doesn't work, then don't go back, and then go try this other thing. And if it doesn't work, then don't do it anymore. Go try this other thing. Like, you just have to be open-minded and admit that you don't know anything about quitting drinking. Yeah. If you did, you wouldn't be trying to quit drinking for the first time.
Right. And listen, if everybody could get sober, quote unquote, on their own, we all would do it.
We would all do it.
Yes. And there wouldn't be 14,000 treatment centers in America. And there wouldn't be all these programs and support groups. Like, if we could get sober on our own, we would. Everybody would. And and I love that, making that distinction too. I heard somebody say a while back, like, I couldn't fix my broken thinking with my broken thinking.
Right. And
I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Yes. Of course I had to have somebody show me how to do it. I couldn't have figured it out. If I could have figured it out, I would have, before I almost killed someone. You know, I would have done it a little sooner. Yeah,
exactly. Totally understand.
So I would love to know your thoughts on the high bottom drunk person, however you want to say this. So, we talk about rock bottom, and there are low bottom drinkers and high bottom. And low bottom is, you could say that I'm a low bottom, right? My rock bottom was pretty low. I was in a car accident at 70 miles an hour. I thought I killed the person I hit. It was pretty tragic.
Mm-hmm.
I drank every day. I mean, so you could say I had a low bottom. There are people that have lower bottoms, right? There are people that do get in car accidents and actually kill people. There are people that do other tragic things and get prison sentences and all of that stuff. And then there is this craze right now. I feel like it's so popular to quit drinking much earlier in the process, right?
Thank God. Yeah.
Thank God. I know. I love that people are just like, you know what? This isn't working for me. It's like, you don't have to ride that thing all the way to the bottom. You really don't.
Right.
You do not have to burn your entire life down to realize that you just don't drink well, you know?
Right.
But I do feel like there are some struggles with that higher bottom person because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they really don't understand. And I was the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really understand that this will cost you your life. If you're sitting back going, well, I'm only drinking 4 glasses of wine 3 nights a week. And even though you don't feel great about it, you're not trashed, you're not falling down drunk, you're not blacking out, right? So I feel like it's hard for people to conceptualize that it will get worse from there.
It is. Yeah. There's one thing that's absolutely just irrefutable. And that's this is progressive.
For
And,
sure.
so I would consider myself a high functioning drinker, and for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't have any major consequences, right? If we're going just by the terms, by the definition, the terms that you just used, I didn't have any major consequences. I hadn't lost a job, had never been fired, didn't get in fights with people, never gotten a DWI. So on paper, I looked like I was doing pretty great. But why did I feel so horrible every day then? That's really, that's the stuff I have to listen to all the time. I don't have to see my track record of seeming perfection on paper all the time. I have to listen to the horrible things I say to myself and the horrible way that I feel. The struggle of figuring out if your problem is bad enough is heartbreaking.
Amen.
It's heartbreaking. And I was stuck there for so long. I was so worried about what that said about me that I stopped being worried about how I felt. It was like, well, what if I'm an alcoholic? Well, what if? Do you feel like garbage every day? Because that's what matters, but I was so obsessed with that that obsession just took over being my own advocate and knowing what kind of life I wanted to have. And it's such a lie. It's like you don't just scrape your knee on the ground and go, oh, this isn't bad enough. Let me just rub some gravel and some grass in it and just make it really bad before I get a Band-Aid. We don't do that. You know what I mean?
Not in any other area of life.
You don't, but for some reason with drinking, we feel like that we just need to get really, really, really bad so that will tell us we need to fix it, rather than just go, this is bad enough. I'm going to make that call. It changes so fast. And before you know it, everything is awful all of a sudden.
Yeah. I was the high functioning person. Like I said, I was not a sloppy drunk, falling down drunk. I drove the right car and lived in the right zip code and wore the right clothes. I had, for all intents and purposes, I had it going on. Mm-hmm. But it turned so fast. And for me, that was getting my first DUI. Once I was in the legal system, it became impossible to continue because you have to jump through all these hoops, right? And I was perfectly happy to jump through all of the hoops except the one where they want you to not drink. And that was the one thing that I couldn't do. So my low bottom really all happened in a span of 8 months. From my first DUI to my sobriety was only 8 months.
I believe it. I drank hard for 15 years and it got really bad in that last year. And it was just 1 year to where it just went from maybe I don't have a healthy relationship with alcohol to really freaking dark. And it just happens before you know it. And that's the thing. It's after a while, you can't negotiate with it anymore. It decides.
Yeah, for sure. I say the same thing. My drinking got really dark at the end. And the last couple of years for me were, I always say, like, I felt like I was drinking with a vengeance. Like I was drinking to die, I think, subconsciously, and because it was just so ugly and I just kicked it up so many notches so fast. Yeah. And it was dark. It was
Mm-hmm.
dark and it was sad and it was lonely and it was suicidal and it was horrible.
But it's crazy though how dark it feels when you're stuck in it. And it's like something changes the second you tell somebody. The second you meet another person who's been there, who's on the other side, you come out of it so much quicker than you spend getting into it, just when you lighten that burden of keeping it all inside. So whether or not that's walking into a meeting full of strangers and telling somebody you don't know, I'm an alcoholic, or if that's telling your therapist, or if that's getting on Instagram and DMing somebody who is sober and saying, I think I have a problem, the weight that will be lifted from you is immeasurable. I mean, it changes
Yeah.
so quickly. And I can't tell you what that feels like until you do it. But there are so many ways to get sober. Like I tried them all. At one point, I was in a place of total burnout because I was like going to meetings, doing the Facebook group, doing therapy, like working out, doing the steps with my sponsor, doing the podcast. Like I was doing all the things. And you can do all the things, but you can't do them all at the same time.
Yeah, right, right.
But that's what's so great about recovery, especially now, is that there's so many ways to do it, and there's no rules that say
That's
you have
right.
to do it this way, unless like you're in the court system and they have a piece of paper that says you have to do it one way. But there
Yeah.
are so many other ways to do it, and you're not going to get in trouble for doing it wrong. You just, if you
Yeah.
mess up, you just start over the next day and try not to beat yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are so many different ways to get support with
Mm-hmm.
online too, which is incredible because that certainly was not the case before. I was talking about this with, coronavirus and the quarantine and all of that. And I think in a lot of ways it was really challenging for addicted people, certainly having support groups closed down, being solely online. But in a lot of ways, I think for people who are really in the very beginning of that journey, I think online meetings probably made it easier for a lot of people,
Yeah.
because there's a huge, crazy fear walking into your first meeting the
Mm-hmm.
first time. Like it is overwhelming. And there were a couple of times that I drove to a meeting and drove right out of the parking lot, didn't even
Right.
make it out of the car. Like I understand that fear. We all have that thing when we go to our
Right.
first meeting. So I think that having those meetings online for so long probably lowered some of the barriers to get in and get comfortable or at least figure it out and be a spectator.
I hope so. I relied on my Facebook accountability group hard in the first year. If I was up late at night and I couldn't sleep and I'm tossing and turning and I'm mulling over some stuff and I don't know what to do with it, I knew I could get online and talk to somebody. You
Yes.
can't walk into an AA meeting in the middle of the night when you have something on your mind. And that's the really cool benefit of how recovery is changing, and what COVID, how it forced people and recovery groups to adapt. And we need that. I think that there are so many horrible things that have happened with COVID, but there are so many cool ways that groups have adapted, or organizations have adapted to make things easier for everybody. I can't imagine going through these past 3 months while drinking. And if I were still drinking, I don't know if COVID would have forced me to finally get help or not, because I would have absolutely just drank myself to death. I can't, it's heartbreaking to think about, but yeah, it's pretty easy now to do it all online. And I think that's effective. I really do. I think it's effective. And again, why not try it? If it doesn't stick, try something else.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I think you have to replace, like if you're really going to do a lot of your recovery online, I think you have to replace the tribe, right? Like AA just made it easy for me because all I had to do was show up in the room and I could make friends and have people to spend time with and go have coffee with and go to movies with. Like that to me is priceless. Having other sober people to hang out with, and not just people that don't drink. For me, I want to be around other alcoholics. I love us. I think we are the most fabulous freaking people, and we are the funniest, smartest people, and we understand one another and connect in a different way, right? And there's a love and acceptance that we get
Mm-hmm.
from one another
Mm-hmm.
because we understand the monster that lives inside of us,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing I would say. If you're going to do the majority of your recovery and meetings online, I feel like you have to find a way to connect with some sober people. You have to have a sober tribe.
Right. And I think that that's a pretty natural thing that happens too with the online community is that eventually you do find your people. You find out where people live. Are they local? Let's do a meetup. Let's go grab
Mhm.
coffee. I think that we're humans and we crave that as a species. We have to be with other people, right? And even with the online communities, that happens naturally. It may not be somebody down the block and you could say, "Hey, let's go catch a movie right after this." Like it might take some more planning, but like I hosted a retreat. It was called Beyond the Bottle. And I did it this past January. And there were 35 people there. And these are people that a lot of them met online. They got to either meet each other for the first time in person, or they use these retreats as an excuse to get together with their sober friends that they know from online. And now they're like hopping around the country, hitting up all these different retreats so they can all get together. And that is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
yeah, it's like it may not be traditional or convenient. Like I said, it may not just be like, hey, let's catch a movie, but we're still finding ways to connect with
Yeah.
other people in recovery.
So I'm fascinated with drunk texting. Like, was this a big struggle for you? Listen, one of the things I say all the time is I'm so grateful that I got sober before texting was a big thing, before there was camera phones. Like, there is no proof of my level of crazy. There's no proof.
Yeah.
But texting, when I got sober, texting was just starting to catch on. Like I
Hmm.
literally, me and a couple of my friends were the only people I knew who were doing it. So I did not deal with this phenomenon, but I swear to you, all of my clients always talk about drunk texting. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I missed this.
I would have been a prime candidate for drunk texting, but that was the extent of my need for control and for pulling off this double life. Even when drinking, I was so concerned about my image and what people thought about me that rarely, rarely would I ever drunk text. I wouldn't even answer the phone after 5 o'clock because I didn't want to be slurring, because I was, I would slur when I drank and I wouldn't want like my parents to call and hear that their daughter was drunk or, I mean, as if, being drunk occasionally is a bad thing. It's not like it happens. Right.
Yeah.
But like I didn't, but I was drunk every night. So,
For
no,
me,
I
it
was
wasn't so occasionally. It
right.
was
Right.
occasionally
Yeah.
all every
I
day.
know. Right. So, yeah, I've always been such an anxiety fueled control freak. And that's the other thing is like, I drink to to quote unquote, calm my nerves. Right.
Mhm.
And it works until it doesn't. And then
Right.
before you know it, you're drinking and you have so much more anxiety. And then you're mad because you don't feel drunk anymore. And then you're just pissed and confused because now at this point you've had 2 bottles of wine and I don't feel drunk. And then you think you're having a nervous breakdown. And it's just this whole spiral. And welcome to 2015 for me.
And there it is in a nutshell.
Yeah. So yeah, no, not a whole lot of drunk texting for me. I'm trying to think. Because I definitely did some Tinder dating when I was drinking. So if I did, it was with strangers who I like. If I did like drunk texting, it was with strangers that I knew I wasn't really going to be invested in, so I didn't really
Yeah.
care.
Yeah. Well, that's the best way to do it, I think. If you're
With
gonna
people that
do
are,
it.
yeah. 2015 Tricia she could treat people pretty disposably sometimes, I guess, but whatever. They don't
Yeah,
remember me, I'm sure.
I did. I did. I had the same problem. I get it.
Yeah. If you're out
Okay.
there though, sorry.
Sorry about that. Okay, this is my favorite question. What is your favorite thing about being a sober person?
Probably that I don't have to worry about stuff anymore. Like except for regular life stuff that's normal to worry about. Like I don't have to wake up and be worried about what I did the night before. I don't have to be worried about somebody finding out. Like I created so many things to worry about by drinking. So just not having that extra worry in my life is so relieving. It's just, I feel so much lighter. Not to mention the fact that it turns out like I have so much more fun when I'm sober. When I was drinking, it was not fun. I was a mess. I was worried I was going to fall. I was so uber concerned about the wrong things, or I was just being really destructive. And turns out I am so much more fun. Like I will dance my ass off until I am sore and can hardly walk. I went to my 20-year high school reunion in October and I was the life of the party. I was the one dragging everybody out to the after party. I'm just going to say it. I was the funnest person in the room. I know funnest isn't really like a real word, but I'm going to use it.
Well, it is now.
Yeah. It's just like, it is so much more fun to be sober. And if it's not fun, then you can't drink that fun. Sometimes things just aren't fun or people aren't fun, and that's okay. You kind of learn to just take things as they are.
Yeah. Whoever would have thought that being sober is the easier, softer way? Like when I think about all the time that all the anxiety I had at the thought of quitting drinking, and oh my gosh, like what would it be like, and what would my life be like, and what will I do, and who will I hang out with, and how will I have fun, like all of that stuff. And a big one for me was I was always hung up on New Year's Eve. Like, how will I ever have a New Year's Eve, especially as a bartender, right? Because New Year's Eve was kind of an epic event. And how will I ever have a New Year's Eve and not drink?
You're worried about 1 out of 365 days, right? And that's what made your decision,
right? That like now I'm not even awake for, by the way. Like
right.
it's non-existent
exactly.
in my life.
That's the thing. Like we get so wrapped up in like, oh, but what about that wedding I'm going to go to in 12 years? And what about when I have that milestone birthday? It's like you are making a decision for your whole life based on an imaginary event like a decade from now. In what world do we ever do that normally? We don't. Like that's not how we live our lives. We go like, you have to look at like what the life you're really living and make your decision from that.
Yeah. And my sobriety totally snuck up on me. Obviously I didn't plan to crash my car. That was not a planned event.
It's usually not. Yeah, it's usually not.
But it did put me in that position of I could no longer argue with myself about it. It was no longer optional.
Mm-hmm.
Like I knew in that moment, as soon as I found out that I did not kill the guy that I hit, when they told me he was okay, I was like, alcohol is no longer an option for me. Like this is off the table. And I actually detoxed for 2.5, 3 days, something like that. And I drank one more time. And knowing I didn't even want to drink. I was just in a weird situation, out with people. I was trapped and I didn't know what to do, right? And I had the strength one time. I had the strength once to say, I'm not drinking. But everybody knew me as this hardcore drinker. And my buddy just looked at me, he's like, Angela, seriously? I know you're going to drink if I get you something. So you may as well just get what you want. And like all these things flashed through my head. I was like, I'm trapped. Like, I don't have a way home. I was an hour from my house. It's like, I don't have a ride. Like I'd already burned all the bridges. Nobody was picking me up. My last friend had just picked me up from the hospital after my accident 3 days before, like I was trapped. I was like, I don't know what to do. How am I going to get through this whole night and not drink? And everybody's going to be mad at me and it's going to be horrible. And I was like, F it, I'll just drink. And I know this is the last time ever. And I'll just drink to get through it. And it was tragic. And I drank like a lunatic. And it was a Friday night. And I woke up the next morning, Saturday morning. And the first thought that went through my head was, thank God that's over. Just thinking about my drinking life. Like, thank God that's over.
I think at about 4 months sober, I had an incident where somebody got mad at me for something that I didn't have anything to do with. And so then they called me just these horrible names, words I've never been called in my life. And I was so paralyzed by that. Like, what is going on? This person hates me and I didn't do anything. And I'm, like, it just wrecked me. And that was the closest I've ever come to relapsing. Like I almost just went to the store and bought a bottle of wine because I did not know how to handle those feelings. And you get so paralyzed is the only word that comes to mind. But the thing is, you can get through it. It's easier just to like make it through a few hours and go to bed than wake up the next morning and know that you just trashed all that sobriety you had. And then you have the hangover, and then you have the anxiety, and then you have the shame and the regret and the remorse and the horrible thoughts. It's like, just get through a few hours or like play a little game with yourself. Like, be like, okay, I'm going to get through tonight. And then if I still feel this way tomorrow, I can drink tomorrow. That was a thing that I would tell myself just to get through the night. And then when the next day came, I didn't want to drink anymore. And I felt so much stronger. But it's worth it just to stick it out and feel uncomfortable. And who are we to feel so entitled that we shouldn't have to feel pain in our life? Like, that's just part of the deal. Pain and feelings are part of the life package. And you can't outsmart them. Like, that's just, you got to pay your dues eventually and feel some uncomfortable feelings, because that's our jobs as humans.
This is really funny because I got my first life coach certification. I think I was 2 years sober, and I didn't know really that I would do coaching as a career. It was something I was always fascinated with. I was always fascinated with self-help. I followed Tony Robbins from the time I was a very young teenager. And I just wanted the certification. I just wanted to know more about it and to be able to work on myself and help my friends with goals and things like that. And it's so fascinating to me how much now, in a really long coaching career, how often I have people like stunned that life is so hard. Like they can't figure it out. And I'm like, well, what the heck what is it supposed to be? Like, life is hard. Like, yes, you're going to be uncomfortable. Like, yes, things are going to fall apart. Like, who told you that it was going to be easy?
If they can, like we miss the orientation when we're born, that they say, okay, here's how it's going to go. Like, things are going to get bad for a while, and then they'll be good, and then they'll be bad, and then they'll be good. And that is your life.
That is it. Yes.
But we don't get that orientation. So you get so used to numbing everything because you think you're numbing all the bad stuff. But in reality, you're numbing all the good stuff too. You're shortchanging yourself. Pain is part of the package. Pain is part of the package, but you got to know it to appreciate the sweet stuff. That's just, that's life.
You are really working a recovery program of any sort, right? If you have some commitment to recovering as a human being, not just getting sober and stopping drinking, but recovering and growing up and retraining those negative pieces of yourself to make them better. Like, if you are actively recovering, then a lot of that stuff doesn't feel nearly as bad. Like, things that would be debilitating to me when I was a less healthy person don't really bother me that much now. Like, my worst sad days are really not that big of a deal at this stage of the game. I can talk myself through it. I know I have plenty of tools and things to do to get through the days. Like, it's just not that bad when you take some time and just create a life that you love and just grow up.
Right. It's like going to the gym for the first time. It's like if you've never worked out your whole life and all of a sudden you go and try to pick up this really heavy, like deadlift, this 200-pound, barbell, you're not going to be able to do it. Right. That's going to be hard, if not impossible. So you start building your strength up to where eventually you're strong enough to be able to do that. And then that's your normal. And it's not so hard anymore. But you had to learn some things, and you had to grow, and you had to challenge yourself, and you had to work, and you had to fail, and you had to try again. In order to get to that point, it just takes a little bit of work. And that's, again, like, this is life. And it's pretty great. It's pretty great, believe it or not.
It is
even the bad
pretty
stuff.
Great. Yes, absolutely. So tell the listeners the best way to find you.
Well, listen to the show every Tuesday, Recovery Happy Hour. They can download it anywhere they listen to their favorite podcasts. I'm on Instagram at Recovery Happy Hour. They can follow me on Facebook. The website is recoveryhappyhour.com. But Instagram and the website are probably the best ways to find out what's new.
Perfect. And I will link all of that in the show notes for you guys too. You guys, she is so awesome. And I have to thank all of you for turning me on to her. I love her perspective, and she's comforting and honest and funny. And I'm so glad I got to meet her and collaborate with her. Super awesome. And don't forget to sign up for the free webinar, see my plan, learn my process, get answers to all your questions with no sales, okay? It's an information webinar, not a sales webinar. We'll spend an hour together. It'll be awesome. www.myrecoverytoolbox.com/120 because it was announced on episode 120. www.myrecoverytoolbox.com/120. I can't wait to meet you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you next week.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.